Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back with another video from Annie News. We've got some cut content videos, and I'm loving this. It's on DanMachi Season 4, Episode 12. I'm up to date. Loving it. Absolutely loving it. It's so stressful to watch, but in such a good way. It's just awesome. But yes, Episode 12 is the first episode of the second half of part of Season 4. And that seems to be where he's going with the cut content. Like I said, I'm up to date. Episode 13 is the most recent episode, so it's going to be interesting to see what has been cut out. So yeah, let's get into it.
Things are about to get pretty grim in DanMachi.
Oh mate, I can
Belle
imagine.
and Ryu are stuck in the deep floors.
Yep.
The Hestia Familia are facing a boss level.
They're fighting a floor boss.
The dungeon itself is literally celebrating.
It's so sick.
So, to make sure you don't miss out on the grisly...
There's so much going on.
Extremely intense moment.
Honestly, it's so intense. Like, it constantly builds you up to think that they're going to do something right, and then just boom, and it's like, oh god, what are they going to do next?
Let's bring back the cut content
Yeah,
for DanMachi
let's do
and
it.
take a look at what exactly the anime left out from the novels. Episode 12, Amphisbaena. Covering Chapter 7 and a bit of Chapter 9 from Volume 14 of the light novel.
Oh, okay, interesting.
With Belle having just been taken to the deep floors, he was beginning to remember a particular conversation he'd once had with Eyes about it. One that alluded to more than just the portions we saw in the anime.
Okay.
You see, it was after she'd said that he'd understand once he got there that she'd also continued to say something more. Something Belle couldn't quite remember, but the words preceding it made it seem like it could have been advice or a warning.
Okay.
Either way, Belle knew that he was now in the deep floors, an environment so vastly different from what he was used to that just the mere size of it left him awestruck due to how open it was.
Mate, as soon as, because the way they ended the first half was just like, it's like, yeah, you're in the bottom floors, mate, and you are not gonna survive.
Aside from the pantry and the Great Wall of Sorrows, it was actually the biggest room that Belle had ever been to, resulting in the phosphorescence lighting to illuminate much less than what it usually would. It was once his eyes had finally adjusted to that Belle could finally see that he was in the Deep Zone, a place the guild themselves had designated as True Deadline.
Damn.
The most dangerous place in the entire dungeon.
Oh yeah.
So, considering the dire situation Belle now found himself in, his mind slowly declined into a state of panic unlike anything he'd ever experienced before.
Don't blame him.
It was a fear that stemmed not only from being in this despair-filled death trap, but also from knowing their injuries made them all the less prepared for it. It's not like he believed he could handle it solo at full strength, but with burns all over his body and his left eyelid
he's
shut,
not
his
doing
usual
well.
determination was slowly deteriorating.
I gotta say as well, the voice actor does such a good job at making him sound like he is like panicking, man, when he's attacking stuff. Oh my god, I love it.
As for Ryu, well, with even more burns from the snake's stomach acid, her condition was significantly worse than Belle's. Top that off with a right leg that was fully broken, and the one person Belle could cling to was now just a liability. He could only call her name as if crying for his older sister. It was the only thing he could do given his current state of fear, loneliness, pain, and suffering. So, with that being the state that Belle was left in the anime,
Juggernaut's still
the other
chasing
scenes
them.
with Hestia and Oranos were both small side events taken from the interlude. Oranos was explaining the purpose and irregularity of the Juggernaut's presence, while Hestia was out asking the mates for help.
Okay.
With regards to Oranos' scene, the only thing worth adding was his and Fel's anxiety. You see, when both realized that the Juggernaut was spawned at the same area of the Hestia Familia, both immediately worried for the safety of Belle. Ever since his help during the incident with the Xenos, both became willing to risk everything for him. He was the one person in Aurario in which both would do anything for. So, even if their actions were to be met with failure, Oranos committed to do all he could to get Belle the immediate help he required.
Right.
Then, in a similar vein as that, Hestia was out doing the same for Ryu. But it was before she had arrived that something interesting had happened. Back at the bar where Ryu was employed, a certain favorite cup belonging to the elf who was missing had suddenly crashed and shattered to pieces.
Oh.
Then, in a weird sort of coincidence,
Symbolic.
Seer's fingers had suddenly started bleeding too.
Oh.
I'm not sure if the two events were related, but one or both of these incidents had caused Seer to leave immediately. She simply said that she was stepping out, then quickly left.
I'd
Of
panic
course,
if my
the other
fingers
girls
started
had
just
tried to
randomly
ask
bleeding.
where she was going, but the silent response left them making assumptions. An assumption that she was leaving to find Ryu. Anya couldn't quite understand why Seer was so attached to her, but she was quite upset that her current predicament was souring the mood lately. Like, before Ryu had even left and gone MIA, her mood was so tense that it was making things uncomfortable. Then, after she'd finally left, with Mia worried and Seer acting weird, there was a constant gloomy mood that just wasn't fun anymore. Thus her current
Something
disdain
wasn't
towards the
right.
situation. But even after all that, Hestia's news of Ryu's current predicament was explanation enough to gain their assistance. Something I'm sure we'll see pan out in just a little bit. Now, with that being all the side stuff, the rest of the episode had focused on the boss fight, the beginning of
So
which had centered on
sick.
Cassandra's monologue. But rather than the usual recount of her recurring premonition, the monologue in the novels was more so a personal memoir of hers.
Oh.
It was a lengthy insight into her current state of mind, which focused mostly on how she got to be so pessimistic. A summary of it doesn't quite do it justice, but while I scroll the entire thing on screen right now, I can at least try to convey the core essence of it. So, after countless
Well,
times of trying to convince others of the truth of her premonition,
shall we read some of this in between him explaining it? No matter what I do, it's always the same. No matter what I say, no one listens. No matter how I beg, my pleas reach no one. It's always the same. The world always stomps on my hard work. The world always jeers at my tragedies. Courage and struggle, even if I scream at the top of my lungs.
the outcome was always the same no matter what she did. It didn't matter how much she tried or how desperate she seemed, because no person, regardless of how close, would ever believe the foreboding nature of them. It was as if she was cursed to forever know the future, yet be useless to change it since no one trusted her. So, with a sense of defeat that only cascaded with every time she was dismissed, Cassandra had given up until one day a boy arrived. A special adventurer who did believe her.
Belle
It
always
wasn't enough to renew
saves
her faith
everybody,
in those
man.
around her, but in this specific case, she felt that she could actually change something. She felt she should at least try to help and maintain this small circle of friends she created. But when the boy who believed her disappeared and the others once again started ignoring her, that's when Cassandra truly walked the line of despair. She was stuck in a place knowing the tragic outcome awaiting them, yet useless to change it because no one would listen.
Same time, though, nearly everyone froze up against the boss because Belle wasn't there, and it took the guy with the axe and the woman with the huge sword to get them to dive in. But yeah, it's interesting that she has such mad emotional reasoning as to emotionally check out of this situation.
Bringing us to the current state of sorrow we see her in here in the anime. Where that sorrow had finally turned to despair was the arrival of a floor boss so befitting of the title that its terrifying form also exuded majesty.
So sick.
It was an impressive creature that many couldn't help but be in awe at. When the dragon used its fire to remind them of what it was, though, it wasn't Haruhime who required saving, but instead Cassandra and Daphne due to Cassandra still being in shock from it. You see, while Haruhime was being carried by Aisha, Daphne had gone back to try and get Cassandra to move. But by the time she had brought Cassandra back to reality, the dragon's napalm was already right in front of them, resulting in Oka having to sacrifice his shield to save them. He did try and angle his shield in order to avoid having it take the brunt of the flames, but even a dispersed portion of it was enough to melt his shield completely. It was a clear indicator of just how potent this fire was. What went to prove that fact even more was the display of flames that burned literally everything. It wasn't just the rocks and crystals that embedded the caves surrounding them, but also the very water in which the monster resided.
Never thought of that.
Nothing couldn't be burned by this dragon's blue napalm.
Never thought about that, yeah. It's on the water as well.
This is because the Amphisbaena spew fire that burned on land and water. It was a trait that stemmed from a special type of flammable liquid produced in its bile duct. Thanks to its extremely hydrophobic quality, the substance could repel water and burn on top of it, resulting in the area turning into this surreal blue-tinted river of fire. This also meant wealth couldn't negate it since it wasn't a type of fire magic.
Right.
Now, with Aisha being the most experienced out of all of them, she was of course the first one ready to fight back.
She was sick.
I mean, she did after all beat it when she was part of the Ishtar Familia.
Right.
The difference between then and now, though, was that Aisha was fighting with a bigger party. There were at least 20 level 3 Berberas, then the level 5 Friend which held them all together. So, for her to only have a small mix of level 2s and level 3s, well, that just made this situation seem even less survivable.
Yeah, it's a bit
There
difficult.
was a group of adventurers who were supposed to be stationed above them, but they had likely run away after seeing the spawning of the floor boss. Aisha was trying to get everyone to do the same, but considering they were the primary targets of the Amphisbaena's focus, running away wasn't as simple as just leaving from where they came from. Plus, with the Tamer's explosions having caused the main entrance to collapse, they couldn't even leave that way if they
Yeah, there's
wanted
nowhere to go.
They could always try for the tunnel leading to the floor below, but with a single napalm having deadly AoE, a narrow passageway like that would be a death trap for them. Of course, none of that really mattered, since in a matter of seconds the whole area was blocked off anyway. The thunderous roar declaring the floor boss's arrival had crumbled away the very roots supporting the colossal tree labyrinth above them.
Trapped everyone inside,
didn't they? It wasn't the entire 24th floor that had fallen, but it was a massive portion of the tree's bottom layer, thus cementing the fact that they were now trapped for good. So, with the only option left being to fight, everyone present needed to prepare themselves for the arduous challenge ahead of them. A floor boss so incredibly strong that its very level was said to be equivalent to that of the Black Goliath. No one knew that that was the case, but the party was essentially faced with a level 5 monster. Level 6 when it was fighting in the water. So, had they known that this was what they were up against, then surely their will would have broken just from the thought of it. I mean, the Black Goliath required 100 upper-tier adventurers just to kill it.
Yeah, that took a lot, so... Wow, okay.
Considering that there was only 9 of them now, their disadvantage would have been made even more apparent. The only person who had truly lost their will to fight, though, was none other than their healer, Cassandra. She was the one who let her intrusive thoughts get the best of her first, leading her to stand in
If only
place
Belle was here, that's the one,
she
yeah.
previously foresaw for herself. While many of the others were definitely thinking the same, they were more so teetering on the edge of despair. And that was all because they didn't have the core component holding their team together. It's not like he was the sole thing keeping them alive, but he was the key pillar of support propelling them forward. To them, he was the closest thing to a hero that any of them could imagine. A paragon of courage that they could always look up to. This may not be something his familia was completely aware of, but for someone like Aisha, it was clear as day. As an outsider looking in, Belle was the beam of light that had guided them every day. He was the voice that had stolen Mikoto's heart, the tears that had captured Lily's, then the back which had spurred Haruhime to follow. But now that that pillar wasn't there to guide them, more than anything they needed a new one, or at least something capable of filling that gap while he wasn't there. Aisha knew she definitely wasn't capable, but perhaps the flames of someone like Welf could, leading us to the very speech which ignited the fire in everyone else. So, with a renewed determination to fight against the monster in front of them, Haruhime signaled the start by commencing her chant for Kokonoe. It was second nature, as she would always do so whenever she was fighting with the Ishtar Familia.
Right.
She didn't know who she was going to buff yet, but the logistics of that was to be determined by Lily.
Oh, right, so it just starts up straight away, and it's like,
well, as fast as possible.
I'll choose as we go.
With Aisha leading the charge after Welf's Hio, her job was to just buy time for Haruhime.
The animation was so good on that.
So long as she maintained aggro for the duration of the chant, the resulting level boost would make winning a lot more likely. So, after using concurrent chanting to activate Hell Kaios, the dragon would respond by dispelling it with its mist. And this was the core defense mechanism that acted as its shield. Every time any sort of magic came into contact with it, an equal amount of crimson mist would be used to neutralize it. So, it wasn't completely impenetrable due to it getting depleted with each subsequent spell, but the dragon could always just produce more whenever it wanted. That's not to say it had an infinite amount of mist stored up inside, but any caster was likely to reach Mind Down before getting even close to the Amphisbaena-The.
Damn, okay.
So there really wasn't any point in even trying that route. Now, to expand on why Haruhime only used 4 of her tails, while yes it was to avoid reaching Mind Down herself, more importantly it was so she would be able to recast Kokonoe. The one tail would be kept just for emergencies, then whenever her magic was fully restored, she would set herself up again to provide even more level boosts.
Sweet, okay.
This was the result of her experience from the fight with the Moss Huge. As the key item preventing the others from getting one-shot, the most important piece to this puzzle was her. More than anything, she was needed to continuously produce these level boosts. When it came to Daphne's spell next, this was a simple buff that gave a small increase to endurance, followed by a massive boost to agility. It was actually the very thing that allowed her to save Mikoto. In a scene that we didn't get to see in the anime, there was a brief moment of hesitation in which Mikoto couldn't act quick enough. The dragon's head was just too fast for even her to react to. So, as it came barreling in straight towards her, Daphne's precognitive ability allowed her to predict that things would end up like this, giving her just enough time to swoop in and rescue Mikoto.
Sweet, cool.
Had it not been for Haruhime's level boost and the buff she had just applied, then Daphne definitely wouldn't have been able to save Mikoto.
She wouldn't be able to make it right.
Now, it was after a combined assault from pretty much everyone that Oko was able to get around the boss and land a hit on it. The reason it didn't go through, though, was not only due to the naturally tough dragon scales that covered its body, but also the combined effects of various elements just making things difficult. Footholds were becoming less frequent, the steam was so hot it eroded their ability to concentrate, the blue napalm constantly consumed oxygen, and the crimson mist acted like a vision-blocking curtain. All this had gone to throw off the timing of Oka's attack here. The moment things really started to peak in difficulty, though, was after Aisha had landed the first effective hit on it. You see, because this had caused the dragon to flee underwater, it had now placed itself in a position where it could reach its greatest potential. Just as I had said before.
Yeah, didn't he say that like it was level 6 underwater?
When the dragon's underwater, it's more like fighting a level 6 monster.
Yeah.
Not only due to the inability to attack it or defend against it, but also because its force and range become far greater than before.
Jeez.
What the group previously believed to be impossible speed for such a large monster was now dwarfed by an even faster acceleration from beneath them. Its very movements were strong enough to cause many tsunamis on the land above it. So, as the situation started to look more and more dire, Lily began to sort through all the options that were available to her. She observed her surroundings, took note of the weapons currently available, then quickly thought of who would be best to use them given their status, eventually leading to her genius plan involving Mikoto. A quick thing to note about that was the extreme caution Mikoto had taken to ensure her chant could go uninterrupted. You see, because she knew staying in one place was extremely dangerous, she was constantly jumping from island to island while continuing her cast chant.
Wow.
Chigusa was also doing all she could to try and protect her as well. Then, it was after that was done that everything happened just like how we saw in the anime. Mikoto's gravity magic had worked, and the Amphisbaena was now trapped under a massive layer of root debris.
Yeah,
it was a desperate position that had led for it to call for backup. Specifically, 6 additional monsters of
these
aqua
mad
serpents
piranha
and
things.
aqua harpies. Now, the last place where we can add a bit more context is the final scene involving Cassandra's uplift. You see, despite everyone trying their best to do all they could, Cassandra just couldn't bring herself to overcome her hopelessness. From deep within the confines of her heart, all she could feel was that sense of resignation. She felt that no matter how she struggled and how she tried, the world would just push her back into despair like how it always did.
Oh, bless.
She did have doubts in the way she was acting, but her body could no longer move the way that she wanted it to anymore. There was also a part of her that felt that this was her punishment. As a person who'd left so many adventurers to their own tragic fates, perhaps this was all of that finally catching up with her. Perhaps this was the cost of sacrificing so many others. Either way, it wasn't until Daphne hit her with some verbal slaps to the face that Cassandra could finally pull herself out of the abyss she was in. The core thing Cassandra had taken away from her remarks was that no matter how grim or bleak the future looked, she should always struggle to push through it with every ounce of strength possible.
You gotta keep
going.
That
was, after all, the very essence of what it meant to be an adventurer. It didn't matter that Daphne never believed her prophecies, because in exchange she was always pushing her forward. Like, any time she would curl up and fall into grief, Daphne would always step in, grab her arm, and pull her out of it. Time and time again, she would demonstrate why she was her exact opposite. And though that would fill Cassandra with feelings of envy and curiosity, more than anything it made her admire her. It was actually the core reason why she had become so attached to her. Cassandra admired Daphne's ability to face reality head-on. She truly loved how Daphne was everything that she couldn't be. It's the reason why she wanted to be her closest friend in the first place. So, with a better understanding of how Daphne does what she does, Cassandra realized she couldn't focus on the past anymore. Yes, she did fail to save many lives before, but what mattered now were the lives that needed saving now. She had decided that she would once again resist despair and challenge the tragedies awaiting her. It was the least she could do to atone for the sins that followed her. So, with their healer now active in the fight, the adventuring party was now at its strongest, bringing us to the end of the cut content for this episode. Now, before I go, feel free to check out the Armory desk mats in the link in the description. You can also come see it on stream while I talk about next week's cut content tomorrow. Every Sunday I'll be talking about the next cut content early on Twitch. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!
Wow. Interesting stuff left out. Not a lot of stuff that was too important, but still little bits and bobs to do with like how characters are feeling at the time and that. Oh, that girl's poem. Emotional. And it is. It's so good. DanMachi season 4 is absolutely boss. Get on it if you've not already. And excuse me, I'll definitely be checking out these cut content videos as they go out. And also, I'm doing a little kind of like minute review of each episode every Saturday on TikTok. So if you just search for Pixel Party Pals on TikTok, I'm doing weekly like 60-second like short reviews on Trigon Stampede, Near Automata, and yeah, DanMachi season 4, and yeah. Thanks to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, link in the description to the Patreon page. $1 or more is all I ask to support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that. And thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe, leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch or discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys, all you guys, next time.